It had been a few months since Ethan and I got married. Everything was going as perfect as I had ever imagined, and I couldn't have asked for a better partner. Ethan was my rock. He worked as a lawyer and had a thriving practice. I worked as an interior designer, and though my job had its stressful moments, I loved what I did. Most days I worked from home, managing clients, choosing furniture and color palettes, and turning dull spaces into beautiful homes. Our lives were busy, but we always found time to be together. On weekends, we loved getting out of the house and going to dinner parties, gatherings, and events with his friends and colleagues. It was an opportunity to socialize, and I had grown close to many of them over time. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan came into the living room, holding his phone in his hand, and looked at me with a smile. "Hey, babe, there's a dinner party at James and Sophie's place tonight. Are you up for it?" I glanced up from the book I was reading. "Sounds fun. Who's going?" "Same crowd," Ethan replied. "You know, my colleagues, some of the business partners, and actually, you haven't met Claire yet." I raised an eyebrow. "Claire?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "She's a friend from law school. I've been meaning for you to meet her. She's new to town, and I invited her over." I smiled, eager to meet someone new. "I'm in. Let's go." We spent the afternoon getting ready, and by the time we left, the sun had already set. The drive to James and Sophie's house was short, and we arrived just as the party was starting to get lively. The warm glow of the lights and the faint sound of laughter greeted us as we stepped inside. I scanned the room, recognizing some familiar faces, but there were also a few I hadn't seen before. That's when I noticed Claire. She was standing near the bar, talking animatedly to a group of people. She had striking blonde hair, sharp features, and an effortless elegance that made her stand out. Ethan seemed to know her well, as he immediately walked over to her with a big smile on his face. "Hey, Claire! So glad you could make it!" Ethan greeted her. She turned around, her smile widening as she saw Ethan. "Ethan, it's great to see you. You look amazing as always." Her tone was warm, but there was something about the way she said it that made me feel a little uneasy. She extended her hand to me. "And you must be Sarah. I've heard so much about you." I shook her hand, trying to hide the sudden knot in my stomach. "It's great to finally meet you," I replied, forcing a smile. Ethan turned to me. "Claire's been a huge help to me with some of my cases. She's incredibly talented." I nodded, still trying to get a read on her. She seemed nice enough, but there was something about her that felt off. As the evening went on, I found myself watching Claire more than I intended. She had a way of commanding attention, and her energy was magnetic. I noticed how often she and Ethan were laughing together, exchanging stories from their past. There was a familiarity between them that made me feel like an outsider. I shook the feeling off. After all, Ethan had known Claire for years, and they were just friends. The party was in full swing, and I tried to enjoy myself by mingling with some of the other guests. But I kept finding myself glancing over at Claire, who was still engaged in conversation with Ethan. As the night went on, I started to feel a little left out. Every time I would try to join in, Claire seemed to have already made her way into the conversation with Ethan. It wasn't that she was being rude, but there was an undeniable energy between them that I couldn't ignore. Eventually, as the night began to wind down, I decided to grab a glass of wine and take a break on the patio. I needed some space to collect my thoughts. Just as I stepped outside, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Claire. "Mind if I join you?" she asked with a smile that seemed a little too rehearsed. "Sure, of course," I replied, trying to sound polite. She sat down next to me, the faint clink of her glass echoing in the quiet night air. "I have to say, Ethan talks about you all the time," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "It's clear how much he adores you." "Thanks," I said, nodding slightly, unsure where this conversation was headed. "You know," Claire continued, "it's not easy being married to someone as successful as Ethan. He's got a lot of people who want his attention, and I bet that can be hard sometimes, right?" Her words were casual, but the underlying meaning was clear. I stared at her, suddenly feeling defensive. "I don't really see it as a problem," I replied. "We have a strong relationship." Claire chuckled softly. Of course you do. But relationships like that, especially with someone as charming as Ethan, well, they can be challenging. You're lucky he's so committed to you. Not everyone can handle that. Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. I wanted to brush it off, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that Claire was insinuating something more. As I was about to respond, the sound of Ethan's voice called me back inside. "Sarah, are you out here?" he called, stepping onto the patio. I turned to him, relieved for the interruption. "Yeah, I'm just getting some air." Ethan smiled and walked over, wrapping his arm around my waist. "Claire's been keeping you company, huh?" he said, his tone light. "Oh, we were just talking," I said quickly, trying to act casual. Claire gave me a small, knowing smile before standing up. "Well, I'm going to head out. I'll see you two soon, I'm sure." She gave us both a polite wave before walking off toward the door. As she left, I felt a mix of emotions: confusion, unease, and something I couldn't quite place. I didn't want to overthink it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her relationship with Ethan than met the eye. Ethan, ever the charmer, seemed oblivious to the tension, happily chatting with everyone around him. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but I couldn't stop thinking about Claire. She had been so friendly, yet her comments about Ethan and our marriage had left me with a sour taste in my mouth. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling lingered. In the days that followed, Claire continued to pop up at various social events. Every time I saw her, my discomfort grew. She would always find a way to subtly draw attention to her connection with Ethan, whether through shared inside jokes or references to their time in law school together. It wasn't just innocent chatter. It felt like she was trying to establish a bond with him, and I was left on the outside looking in. One evening, after a long week of work, Ethan and I were having dinner at home when I finally decided to confront him. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about Claire," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Ethan looked up, clearly caught off guard. "Claire, what about her?" "I don't know. I don't feel right about her. She's always so close to you, and some of the things she says make me uncomfortable," I admitted, trying to express how I felt without sounding paranoid. Ethan's face softened. "Sarah, you're being too sensitive. Claire is just a friend. She's harmless, I promise. I understand that it might be awkward for you, but there's nothing going on." I sighed, feeling both relieved and frustrated at the same time. "I don't know, Ethan. It just feels like she's always trying to insert herself into our lives. She makes little comments, and it seems like she's trying to get too close." Ethan reached across the table and took my hand. "I promise you, nothing is going on. You're the one I'm with, okay? You have nothing to worry about." But even as he said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just Claire's behavior. It was the way Ethan seemed to brush it off, as if it was nothing. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but every time I thought about it, my stomach turned. The next weekend, at another dinner party, my suspicions were confirmed. Claire was there, as expected, and this time she wasn't just subtle in her actions. She was downright bold. During the evening, as Ethan stepped away to speak with a colleague, Claire approached me with a glass of wine in hand. "You know," she said, her tone dropping to a more serious level, "I think you're really lucky to have Ethan. He's such a catch. But sometimes I wonder if you really appreciate him. He's been through so much, and I just hope you're giving him the support he deserves." I blinked, taken aback by her words. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice wavering. Claire's lips curved into a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just remember, Sarah, Ethan's a man who needs someone who truly understands him. Don't let him slip through your fingers." Her words struck me like a slap to the face. I knew in that moment that Claire wasn't just a friendly colleague. She was something far more dangerous. I didn't know how to respond, so I just walked away, my mind racing. The unease that had been building for weeks was now undeniable. Claire wasn't just interested in being friends. She was trying to undermine my relationship with Ethan, and it seemed she was getting closer to achieving her goal. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything but the realization that Claire was playing a dangerous game. But I wasn't about to let her win. I would confront Ethan once and for all and make him understand the truth.